Hi, my name is Karina, and I'm the business owner of the Laundromat, Self-Service Dog Spa, and Grooming Salon. Our internet needed to be fast enough to handle multiple users. We have phones, tablets, and multiple workstations. At the end of a groom, we take the dog over to our picture station, and with Verizon Fios, it's super easy to just upload the picture quickly so I can get on to my next dog. To put us ahead of the competition, we needed to have service that was very reliable. Verizon came in and set it up, and I haven't really had to think about it since.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Christine Rudkin from the Verizon Business Markets team, and I want to welcome you to our monthly Verizon Small Business webinar. We know that it can be hard to find the time to keep up with business trends, and our aim is to provide an up-to-date resource that is easy for you to access. Our sessions bring leading small business experts straight to you. All sessions are recorded and are available for viewing online at verizon.com/webinar about a week after the live broadcast. Our featured speaker today is network security expert and president of Banks Technology Services, Philip Banks. Philip started out as an internet entrepreneur at the age of 12 when he created a fully monetized website that attracted over 250,000 annual visitors. After obtaining his business degree and working in financial services, Philip became the network administrator at a large accounting firm. In 2011, he founded Banks Technology Services to help businesses use their technology more effectively and keep their networks safe. I'm sure that Philip has lots of valuable cybersecurity tips to share with us today as he tells us how to keep our networks safe and our sanity intact. Philip, it's all yours.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Christine, for that introduction. And thank you for everyone who's spending time with us today. I know your time is very important. And I pledge to do my best today to make this investment worth your while and to give you some practical takeaways that you can implement in your business. So let's dive right in. Cybersecurity, network security, these are buzzwords today. It seems every day you hear about a company getting hacked, a new virus spreading like wildfire, or ransomware that's encrypting files and forcing users to pay. So how do you make sure that your company is taking appropriate measures to ward off these threats? That's what we're going to talk about today. Now, I do want to give you a warning. There's a lot of information that we're trying to cover today. It's a very broad topic, and it's just by its nature, it's very technical. So I'm going to do my best to hit each item at a high level and explain these principles in a way that's easy to understand. At the end of the presentation, there will be a Q&A session, so if you think of something along the way, I didn't cover something adequately or something's just not clear, go ahead and type those questions in and we'll get to as many of those as we can at the end of the presentation. So let's get started. The overarching theme that you're gonna see today is this layered approach. Think of it as a puzzle. All these pieces work together to make up cybersecurity and network security. The point is that one solution will not keep your network secure. So we're going to look at the different pieces of this puzzle. We'll start with the hardware. That's your router, your firewall, things like that. We'll move into content and URL filtering. Then we'll take a look at software policies. These are policies on your server that control how software runs. Then we'll check out endpoint protection, and that's the software that's installed on your workstations, typically antivirus software and that sort of thing. Then we'll look at patching and updates, how to keep your network secure after an exploit is detected. And then we'll finish up with administrative rights. What are they? Why you may or may not need them for your users. So we'll start with the UTM Gateway. Now, UTM Gateway, that's probably not a very familiar term to most. UTM stands for Unified Threat Management. That's just a fancy way of saying that there are multiple security services running on this one device. So traditionally, this is your router and firewall. We combine those into this one device, and the idea is to block security threats before they can enter your network. A UTM device, it combines your router, your firewall, and then we add on security functions on top of that. So it may have anti-spam capabilities or antivirus capabilities. Some will have malware, VPN, and content and URL filtering as well. So those are all the pieces that make up a UTM gateway. How does a UTM work? The UTM gateway is processing and inspecting all of the data that enters your network. If any of the data is suspect, the device will prevent it from entering the network. Most of these devices do require a license or a subscription to keep their definitions up to date. So that's one thing to consider. When you're looking for a UTM, what are you looking for? As I said, the license and subscription costs. That's something that's not going to be in on the shiny brochure. The license and subscription costs can be fairly substantial, so it's something to factor into your purchase decision. You'll also want to check and see if the device you're looking at has remote access and VPN capabilities. That would allow you to log into your workplace from home or from a remote work site and access your files and server resources and that sort of thing. You'll also want to look at the throughput and processing power. If you have a very fast internet connection or lots of users, this device is going to have to process a lot of data. So if you do have that in place, you will need a more robust device so that it does not become a bottleneck to your network. And then you'll want to look at wireless capabilities. Your office may have wireless access points already built in. If that's the case, you wouldn't need Wi-Fi on your UTM. If not, you just want to look for a UTM device that has built-in Wi-Fi. And then finally, the vendor security labs. How often is the vendor putting out updates for this device? Do they respond quickly to new threats? Those are some things you'll want to take into account. And just some examples and costs for these devices. SonicWall T, Z-Series, Cisco ASA, you can see some other brands there. These devices are going to start around $300. And they can go up, just like most stuff in technology. You can probably spend as much as you want on them, but typically between $300 and $1,000 for smaller organizations. And then those annual licensing fees. Usually you can add on individual pieces. You could just add anti-spam or you could just add antivirus. So if you just have one security service, it may only be $100 a year. If you buy the whole suite, probably closer to $1,000. So keep that in mind as well. Let's move on to content and URL filtering. Content filtering is controlling the content that a computer is allowed to access on a network. The filtering is based on specific content and content categories. So if your business wants to block social media sites, you would do that here. Block adult sites, things like that. If you have an HR department, they might want to block job search sites like monster.com or indeed.com. And then from a security standpoint, maybe your IT support company wants to block Adobe Flash content, something along those lines. It's basically allowing or denying based on the content of that website. I actually had a client call on Friday, and the person I was talking to had taken a walk around the office that morning, and they saw 3 employees watching the NCAA tournament on their computer. So they wanted us to block some video streaming and the basketball game so they could make sure their employees were staying productive. So we were able to do that with the content filtering. So how does it work? The data is inspected by the filter and then compared to a database of rules. So if you did want to block Adobe Flash content, the filter would be inspecting data. If it detects that Flash content, it's going to just simply discard it. So you may see a website where the website would load completely except for where that Adobe Flash data was, and you'd probably just see a blank area or maybe a gray box or something where that data was discarded. Again, similar to how the UTM required larger or greater processing power, the content filter can also require quite a bit if you have a very fast internet connection and if you're a large organization. So those are some things to keep in mind there. What is URL filtering? So whereas content filtering you would block by these categories, URL filtering is very specific. You would block by website address or IP address. And it's simply allowing or denying the traffic based on the URL of a website. So this is where you could specifically block Facebook.com or YouTube.com or maybe ESPN.com so you're not watching basketball games. So how does URL filtering work? It's pretty simple. There's really two ways to implement this. It's most often used with block lists. So you would have a list of all the websites that are blocked, and then it just simply denies traffic to that list. Some of the filters, you can also kind of spin that around where everything is blocked except for what is on an allow list. So you would have to specifically define the websites that you want to allow. And all it does is compare the origin of the data with the block list or the allow list, and then filter it based on that. If the data matches, it's filtered out. What do you want to look for in content filtering? One of the biggest thing I think is just the granular capabilities of a filter. You could block your social, say you want to block all social media sites, but say your HR department has recruiters or something that need to go to LinkedIn.com to find prospects. The granular capabilities would allow you to block social media sites and then allow LinkedIn.com. Same thing with video streaming sites. You block video streaming sites, but maybe you have some developers or designers who use lynda.com for computer-based training. You could then specifically allow lynda.com while blocking video streaming sites. And then you want to look at where does it filter. There's three places where you can implement this. One is at the workstation. If it's filtering at the workstation, the data will enter your network, and then it's discarded if it's filtered out. That's going to use your bandwidth and could potentially slow your internet connection if you're filtering a lot of data. The cloud is another place where it can filter. In that case, data is discarded before it looks for your network. It's your cloud filter would be a middleman there, so that data, that filter would not affect your bandwidth or your network speed. And finally, the UTM Gateway. A lot of the UTM gateways have this capability built in. So if you filter there, the data is still not entering your network. Some examples and costs of content filtering. OpenDNS, Barracuda, there's a few other examples there. And as far as cost, these are usually on a subscription-based model, a per device fee. You're probably looking between $2 and $5 per device per month for this service. If you do go with a hardware solution, probably $300 to $1,000 would be the ballpark that we're looking at there. So now we're going to take a look at software restriction policies. Software restriction policies they control the files and file types that are allowed to execute on your computer. Software restriction policies can allow or reject programs based on several criteria. You can set these up based on file name. So if you wanted to block Spotify or Skype, you could define the file names of those programs and set a block for that. And then you can block by file path. In this example, you see the app data folder listed there. That's a very common location for viruses and malware to execute from. So we normally block any program from executing from within the app data folder, just out as a precaution. Now, occasionally there are programs legitimate programs that do execute from that folder. Actually, I believe Spotify is one of those programs. And in that case, you can just simply make an exception. You can make an exception for that particular program. And then finally, you can block by file type. So BBS, PS1, those are all script files. And for IT folks, scripts are very useful and handy. But if you're not trying to use them, if you're not using them for good, they can do a lot of damage in the hands of a hacker or somebody who's trying to exploit something. So here's this is just an example of a software restriction policy that blocks Spotify. So you can see we have the file path and the file name there for Spotify. And then we simply set it to disallowed, and that's it. So if this is in place and you try to run Spotify, you're going to get this message. It says the program has been blocked by group policy. Please contact your administrator. So you can see it's not allowing the program to run. There's two ways you can implement software restriction policies. There's whitelisting and blacklisting. Whitelist will block everything except for what you specifically allow, whereas blacklist will allow everything for what we specifically block. So one's blocking everything, one's allowing everything. So with whitelisting, you can think of that as the lock on your front door. So anybody can come up to your front door, but the only people allowed to enter would be the person with the key. Whereas with blacklisting, you can think of that as the TSA no-fly list. So anyone can fly on a plane except for the people on that list. Whitelisting is probably more effective than blacklisting. However, the downside is that it takes a lot of time to set up because you have to define every single program that you want to be able to run on your network. And it would also take it would take additional time to maintain that going forward as programs change and that sort of thing. For examples and costs, this is the good part about software restriction policy. There's nothing else to buy. If you have a Windows server in your office, you have everything you need to implement this. It's simply a matter of configuring it. It is pretty technical, so your IT support will probably need to handle that, but nothing else to buy. No purchases to be made there. So we're going to move on to spam filtering. This is probably our largest focus today. What is spam filtering? It's the process of identifying unwanted or potentially malicious email messages and preventing them from reaching a user's inbox. Spam filter, it's been around for long before email. This is what you do when you get the mail, you get home from work, you're standing over top of the trash can and you're throwing away the junk and you hang on to the important stuff. It's the same thing. There's lots of stats and everything about spam here, but the point is without effective spam control, it's costing you a lot of money and it's costing your employees a lot of productivity. Having to manually delete and filter through spam messages in your inbox is not how you should handle this. So how does spam filtering work? Spam filters look for many things. They look at different criteria of an email message, such as certain keywords, country of origin, language, attachments, and many more things. And then they take all that information and they come up with what's called a spam score. So once a message has a spam score, the filter will apply certain actions based on that score, and we call that the spam score threshold. So let's say this particular filter has a spam score between 1 and 10, and we'll say 1 is most likely to be a legitimate message, and 10 is most likely to be spam. So say between 1 and 3, we might allow that, and that message would pass through and go straight to the inbox. Let's say between 3 and 6, that might either be quarantined or maybe just flagged as spam and go to the junk folder. And then anything above 6 could be just simply discarded because it's definite spam. So that's just an example. Every filter is different, but that's the they all have those similar actions and spam score thresholds. There are 4 main types of spam filters. Right now, probably the most popular type of filtering would be a cloud-based filter, and this is where mail is redirected from its destination, and then it's processed in the cloud. The good email is then passed along to your email server for delivery. We also have software-based spam filters, and these typically run on your in-house email server or possibly even on the workstation itself. There are anti-spam appliances. These are network devices that's all they do. They just filter out spam, and you'll find those would be in your network rack around your router and your UTM Gateway, hopefully, and your network switches and that sort of thing. And then finally, there's built-in spam filters, so the programs that you already have and that you're using, such as Outlook or maybe Mozilla Thunderbird, they all have built-in spam filters. So let's look at each one of these in a little more detail. Cloud-based spam filters, they redirect all mail destined for your inbox to a spam filter located in the cloud. So after messages are filtered, the clean email is then passed to your inbox. The great thing about cloud-based spam filters is that the spam never enters your network. So all the processing takes place in an outside environment. So none of that junk ever even enters your network. The downside is it's a middleman. There's an additional network hop for this processing to take place, so there can be a small delay in delivery. We're talking 30 seconds. It's not nothing significant, but it is there. And here's some examples of cloud-based spam filters. Every Cloud, MailAssure, Spam Stops Here, and a few others there. And this is here's an image of one of the filters that we use. You can see all the many different options. You've got whitelisting, blacklisting, aggressiveness settings, all kinds of things you can configure to make it work for your business. And this one also has outbound filtering. You can turn that on and make sure that none of your computers are sending out spam as well. So that's a nice feature. So that's those were cloud-based spam filters. Let's move on to software-based spam filters. So the software filters are going to typically run on an email server or the individual workstation in your office. Incoming email is directed to the spam filter for processing, and then the clean mail is passed on to your inbox. Good things about these: delivery speed is usually faster than cloud-based solutions because there is no middleman. It's coming directly to your computer and then being filtered there. The downside is that if any spam that is coming in, it's entering your network before it's processed. So it's making it all the way to your computer before any of this filtering takes place. And typically these, there are exceptions, but typically these software-based spam filters are not as effective as the cloud filters. Examples here are Spam Titan, Mail Washer, and Spam Fighter. So we'll look at spam filtering appliances now. These are anti-spam appliances. They're hardware devices that are devoted solely to identifying spam. It's nice to have a separate device doing this because it's not taking up any resources on a computer or on a server. This device is solely devoted to that job. The pros are that the hardware device it's built for this. The only thing it does is filter spam, so it's very good at it. The downside is that they're usually the most expensive solution, and they can get very expensive. Some examples here would be Barracuda, Sonic Wall, and Sophos. And lastly, the built-in spam filters. These are filters that are built into your existing email solutions, Microsoft Exchange, Outlook, etc. The good thing here is that usually there's no setup or implementation required. They just work right out of the box. Everything's already in place. The downside is they're the least effective spam filters of the ones that we've mentioned. So some examples here. If you have a Microsoft Exchange server in your office, that will have a built-in spam filter. If you use Office 365 or Google Apps, Gmail for your email, those all have built-in spam filters as well. And then your email client, the software you use, like Microsoft Outlook or Mozilla Thunderbird, they have their own built-in spam filters. And then finally, the internet service providers. If you get your email from Verizon, there's a built-in spam filter on Verizon system that'll cut down on the spam that you receive. Here's an image of the Outlook 2016 spam filter options. You can see compared to the cloud filter, there's not as many options. It's not as robust, but it still does a pretty good job. Let's look at two different types of spam here. There's two terms we want to talk about. First is spoofing. Spoofing is sending an email with a forged sender address. And then phishing is attempting to obtain sensitive information by disguising who an email is from, making it appear to be from a trustworthy source. So in a phishing attack, someone would spoof an email address, forge the email address, to make it appear that it's coming from someone it's not. So for an example of this, let's say you receive an email that looks like it's from your bank. It says it's from Wells Fargo or Capital One or something along those lines. And it's requesting that you reset your password. So you click on this link, and it takes you to a site that looks like your bank's website, but it's not. It's actually a scammer that's attempting to capture your password. They'll make the website look just like your bank's, but what they're trying to do is capture your password and then gain access to your online banking. So how do you combat that? How do you prevent this from happening? Well, that's where something called Sender Policy Framework comes into play. The SPF record is a public record that indicates which email servers are allowed to send an email for a particular domain. This is something that you would set up with your web host or possibly your email provider. So if GoDaddy hosts your website, you could set this up with them. It's just a record that you set up with your web host. There's no charge for it or anything, no additional charge anyway. But it defines which email servers are actually yours. so that if somebody's trying to forge that address, hopefully the spam filter will check that and know better. So here's an example of how this could work. Let's say your spam filter receives a message from john@example.com. The filter is going to look up the SPF record for that example.com domain. The SPF record is going to say the only email server that can send email for example.com is mail.example.com. So then the spam filter is going to check and see, okay, well, where did this email message come from? If it came from mail.example.com, then it may pass it on through to the inbox. However, if it came from a different email server, it's going to know that, well, wait a minute, that didn't match the email server in the SPF record, and that's going to throw up a flag, and it's going to be marked as spam and most likely discarded. A quick real-world example of this: we had a client call and say it was actually the accounts payable clerk. She received an email that appeared to be coming from the boss or the owner of the company. Now it was flagged as spam, so she immediately suspected something. But the email was requesting that she wire $10,000 to an account. So because it was flagged as spam, she immediately called the owner and said, "Hey, did you send this email?" He did not send that email. So it was a classic example of a phishing attack where they spoofed the email address. Now, luckily, there was an SPF record in place, and that's why the message was flagged as spam. Without this SPF record, that could have gone through straight to her inbox, and you can imagine the repercussions from that, a $10,000 mistake. So SPF records, it's technical, and I hope I described it okay there, but it's important. I think every business needs an SPF record out there just to make sure that their email is being sent legitimately. Some examples and costs of the different types of spam filters that we looked at. Cloud filters, again, we're kind of the price point for most of these things are very similar. The cloud filters here, $2 to $5 per address per month. We'll see those numbers in some additional sections as well. For software filters, mainly software filters are going to be installed software. So you're looking at about $30 per installation per device, and that's likely also going to have some sort of annual renewal. And then there are some subscription software filters as well, which would again be that $2 to $5 per address per month. When you get into the appliance filters, that's where the numbers start going up. 500 to 5,000, and you can spend a lot more than that, depending on the size of the organization. And then the built-in filters that we discussed. No additional costs on those built-in filters. It's already built into the software, so there's nothing else to purchase there. Let's take a look at endpoint security software. Endpoint security software is what's installed on each of your workstations and servers. So a decade ago, this was your Norton antivirus or your Symantec software, and it had one purpose. It just was antivirus software. So today, there's a sort of a new generation of this sort of software, and they call it endpoint security software now, because it's not just antivirus. It's antivirus, it's anti-malware, anti-ransomware, and the list can go on depending on which specific software you're using. Some of the endpoint security software have a fairly new feature called sandboxing. And sandboxing is a way to safely execute suspicious code in a quarantined environment. So what it can do is if something sets off your antivirus or ransomware filter software, it can take the program or the code that was suspicious and actually run it in a safe environment. And while it's running this code, it can see exactly what it's trying to do, what actions it's trying to take, and then based on all that, it can decide whether it's safe or not to let through. So it's just a way to very thoroughly inspect the file, and it's a very nice feature to have in your endpoint security software. Some other things that you can include, things like USB protection. A lot of companies do not want people plugging USB thumb drives into their computer and taking files home. Depending on the line of business, that could be a big problem. So they'll have things like USB protection, browser protection, amongst others there. So how does endpoint security software work? There's really two approaches here. There's a signature-based endpoint security software and a behavior-based endpoint security software. So the signature-based works by inspecting files for patterns that match known threats. Signature-based software is very effective against known viruses and ransomware. But the problem is, what happens when a brand new threat spreads rapidly across the internet? That's where your behavior-based approach comes in. The behavior-based approach looks at what the potentially malicious application is attempting to do. So these are very effective against the encrypting ransomware that's running rampant these days. The encrypting ransomware is rarely detected by traditional signature-based approaches. So this is where behavior-based really shines, and it can protect against brand new threats that have never before been seen. So, what do you want to look for in your endpoint security software? Choosing a software package here can be daunting. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of options here, and it seems every manufacturer has a report or a study that all say their product is the best. I think the thing to do here is just pick a name brand or pick a reputable manufacturer and just go with it. Don't waste your time trying to pick the very best one. Just get something in place here. The key features that you want to look for here is combining that signature-based approach with the behavior-based approach. So you put both of those together, you get software that take both of those into account, and you'll have a great solution there. Resource overhead. Some of these programs take a lot of RAM and a lot of CPU power when they're scanning for viruses or inspecting a download or something like that. Check on that resource overhead. You don't want it to cause a slowdown on your computer. Another cloud-based endpoint security software, that's certainly a growing trend. Just cloud anything is a growing trend, I guess, but specifically here at the endpoint security software. And then you want to look at the capabilities of the vendor security labs. How often are they updating? How quickly are they responding to new threats and that sort of thing. And then for some examples and costs, here's some brands: Symantec, ESET, Bitdefender. There's lots of name brands in this space. And then there's also Windows Defender. Windows Defender is built in to Windows 10. It does a pretty good job. I probably wouldn't recommend it for a business environment, but certainly it's great for your home computer, and like I said, it's built in, so no charge for that. As far as costs, again, we're looking at the installation and the subscription model here. $25 per device per year for the installation. You're probably you're going to have an annual renewal to go along with that. And then if you have the subscription pricing model, again, $2 to $5 per device per month for this service. Here's a couple of examples here. On the left there is the Windows Defender screen. That's in Windows 10. You can see some of the security services that are built in with that one. And then on the right, we have, this is actually a Bitdefender product, and that is this particular one is a cloud-based endpoint security software that works really well. Let's take a look at patching and updates. So what is patching? Patching is the process of approving and installing updates to the software, hardware, and operating system installed on your computer. We normally use the term patching when you're addressing a security risk, and you'll use the term update when there's, say, an improvement to a program or maybe a new feature, an upgrade, that sort of thing. So where do these patches come from? The software companies and security firms, these people are constantly trying to find defects and exploits in the software, and they're trying to do that so that they find them first before any harm can be done. Once one of these defects or vulnerabilities is identified, the software company should create a patch that will address it, and then hopefully push these patches out pretty quickly to resolve that vulnerability. So how does patching work? For most folks, you're probably familiar with Windows updates. By far the most well-known patching system. That mostly takes care of patching on a home computer. Newer versions of Windows are configured by default to download and install these updates automatically. So there's, it's almost a hands-off operation there. Business networks typically use a third-party patch management system. And the reason for this is so that your IT support can do some testing. They can review some of these updates. They can decide what updates need to be pushed out and what updates maybe aren't so important. And that's important when you're affecting 10, 20, 30 computers or more. If you push out a bad update, and now you've got a lot of computers that are crashing or blue screening or something like that. So the third-party software that allows that reviewing and testing period, so that you have a little more control over how those updates are pushed out. So let's talk about Patch Tuesday. Patch Tuesday is when Microsoft releases new updates and patches. It occurs on the second Tuesday of every month. So that second Tuesday of every month, that's when everything comes out. And if you're on a home computer, you probably see the new updates available pop up at the bottom of your screen. Occasionally there'll be another release, which would be the fourth Tuesday of the month. That's, if something comes up and they need to get another update out, and it's not necessarily critical, they'll release an update on the fourth Tuesday of the month as well. Now, when something is critical, there's a severe exploit or something that's causing big problems or potentially could cause big problems, they'll go ahead and release a patch at any time. They won't worry for the release cycle there. They'll just get the patch out as soon as they can. Another term is Exploit Wednesday. So this is the day after Patch Tuesday, and that's when computers that aren't patched are most at risk. So when Microsoft releases a patch, they say it addresses these following vulnerabilities, and in doing so, it gives information on the vulnerability itself. So that then gives the opportunity to the hackers to develop something that may be able to take advantage of that. So then they could target computers that were not patched and target that vulnerability. So for examples and costs, Windows Update, built-in, nothing to purchase there. There's another program called Microsoft System Center. That's normally for very large organizations, so it's probably out of the scope for this presentation. And then you have Kaseya, SolarWinds, and GFI. These are patching programs that your IT support company may use to take care of your computers in the office there. For those programs, you're again looking at that subscription fee, $2 to $5 per device per month for something along those lines. And System Center, that's, like I said, that's for much larger organizations, but you're talking thousands in licensing depending on the size and the number of users and devices. Here is a screen that shows the patch management system that we use. You can select all the patches there on the left. You can approve them. You can deny them. You can push them to certain machines. If you have a couple of test machines that you want to see how they react to the new updates, you can push just the test machines, and you can really get granular and pick exactly what you want here. So that's a nice system. And then here is your standard Windows Update screen. This is in Windows 10. Windows 10, it pretty much handles it all for you, and in fact, it makes it difficult if you don't want it to handle updates for you. Sometimes they seem that they're forcing the updates on the users, but this is that screen for Windows Updates. So let's talk about administrative rights. What are local administrative rights? Local administrative rights allow full access to a computer. That allows you to install or remove any program, modify and delete any files. You can change settings, configurations, anything like that. That all sounds great, but it also opens the door to malware and viruses. So why do you need administrative rights? And the answer here is normally you don't. During my normal day-to-day, the user account that I use on my computer does not have administrative rights. And that's strictly for security. We're trying to prevent things from executing without our permission. Most programs today will run just fine without administrative rights. It hasn't always been that way, but most programs today will run without administrative rights. One thing you will need administrative rights for is manual software installations. Anytime you install new software on a computer, it almost always requires those administrative rights. So you might ask, why should we restrict administrative rights? The number one reason why you should be restricting administrative rights is to combat malware, ransomware, and viruses. Here's a quick example of how it works. Let's say a user opens an infected email attachment, or maybe they click on a link that they shouldn't. So without this user even knowing about it, now there's ransomware being downloaded to the computer. Once the download is complete, the ransomware is going to try to execute. Now here's the two scenarios. If a user is logged into a standard user account, the program is going to fail to execute, or it's going to prompt you to enter administrative credentials. Without those administrative credentials, the program cannot run. On the flip side, if the user is logged into an administrative account, the program's going to run, and it's going to run silently in the background. And it's going to be, if it's encrypting ransomware, it's silently encrypting all of your files, and you don't even know that it's going on. So a couple things you can do here. One thing we like to do is set up a maintenance account. And what this maintenance account does is it has administrative privileges, but you don't log into it when you log onto your computer. You would use this account if you're trying to change a setting or if you're trying to install software. You'll get a prompt like the one on the right here. That prompt indicates that you need administrative rights to do whatever you were trying to do. And this is where the user could enter their maintenance account credentials. We give them the username, the password, and they just enter it there when they're trying to do something that requires administrative rights. But what it does is, so it allows them, control over their computer and to change settings, install software, that sort of thing. But it prevents malware and viruses from executing in the background without the user knowing about it. Let's quickly talk about the principle of least privilege. The principle of least privilege states that a user should only be given permissions essential to performing their job. So we'll look at an example here. Let's say you have an accounting department and an engineering department. The accounting department users would be set up so that they do not have access to files used by the engineering department. The accounting department can access the accounting department's files, and the engineering department can access the engineering department files, but they can't access each other's files. So why would you want to isolate the departments like this? Let's say someone in the accounting department got became infected with malware or some ransomware or something like that. The engineering department is not affected because the accounting users don't have any access to the engineering files. And vice versa. If somebody in the engineering department got a virus and that virus went out and tried to infect the entire network, well, it couldn't because the engineering users don't have access to anything but the engineering files. Now, it can cause lots of damage in the engineering department, but your accounting department, your HR, everybody else is unaffected by it when you implement this principle of least privilege. So it dramatically reduces the attack surface for malicious code and minimizes any resulting damage, and thus minimizes the recovery time. So let's wrap it up here. Like we said, the overarching theme is this layered approach, the puzzle pieces. So no single piece of the puzzle is going to secure your network. Each piece focuses on a particular attack surface, and together they minimize the risk to your servers, your computer, and your data. These are principles. Every business has different needs. You need to take these principles, and they need to be tailored to your specific business needs. You don't want to apply a bunch of security policies and inhibit your employees or make extra work for your employees. These need to be tailored to your needs and to your specific business processes. And I would be doing a disservice if I didn't at least mention backup and disaster recovery. So all this network security, it's not going to do anything in the case of a fire or a flood or some a natural disaster. So always make sure your backups are working correctly. And just as important, make sure you test them on a regular basis. We've seen lots of examples where somebody has backups and then they go to use them and they simply don't work, whether it's file corruption or maybe a bad hard drive or something along those lines. Check them, make sure they're working correctly, and then test them on a regular basis. And finally, have you need to be proactive about coming up with a disaster recovery plan. This is something that needs to be done ahead of time. You don't want to, be in the middle of a disaster. You don't want to come into a crash server and not have a plan. That's the wrong time to come up with a plan. You want to hit the ground running and begin implementing your plan immediately. So that about wraps it up. I know it was a lot of information. I hope I was able to communicate it in a clear way. If not, we're going into a Q&A session here shortly. Let me be a resource, though. I would be happy to answer any questions down the road. I'd love to hear from you. I'm happy to give advice, anything I can do to help. So here's my email address. There's my phone number. Please use those and get in touch. And then finally, the content that we've talked about today, that's in our ebook, How to Secure Your SMB Network. It goes into a lot more detail, a lot more examples, and just specific recommendations about how you can implement these things in your business. So if you'd like to get a hold of that, head on over to banks-tech.com/Verizon. You just put in your name and your email address, and we'll send it right out to you. You don't have to wait for me to send it. It's all automated, and we'll get that right over to you. So if you have questions, go ahead and get those sent in. Type those into the system there. That's it for the presentation today. So let's go ahead and move into the Q&A session.
Okay, we're seeing lots of questions come in here. I'm going to get to as many of these as possible. Let's take a look at the first one here. So here's someone who says, for a small business using an outside server for email in a shared environment, do you have any suggestions for email setup to ensure that email gets delivered and received and doesn't get lost in cyberspace? He says he has email addresses on Yahoo and Google and a few other services, but none of them are 99% reliable. So the first thing I would suggest is make sure that you have a business class email solution in place. I wouldn't recommend any of the free email services. They're fine for personal use, but they're just not made for business, and you're going to run into problems when you start sending attachments around and things like that. So start with a business class email solution. That's going to be something like Google Apps or Microsoft Office 365. There's many others out there, but those are just two of the more prominent. And then I would make sure you combine everything onto a single system. Get all of your email addresses onto your business's domain name into a single email system. So you mentioned Yahoo and Google and a few others. So get all those under one umbrella. And then make sure you get that SPF record set up. So when you set up that SPF record, not only does it help cut down on scamming and spoofing and phishing like we talked about, but it also helps getting your emails delivered because your recipients are able to authenticate the email server that sent your message. So that's important. That's really going to help out with the deliverability of your email. And then just in general, the first place to check when you're not receiving emails, check your spam filter, check your junk folder. Depending on the type of spam filter in place, you may just need to configure some additional settings. You can always whitelist a particular email address if there's one in particular that's causing problems. And then you can also look at those spam score threshold actions that we talked about. You can turn the aggressiveness down or turn the aggressiveness up depending on your specific needs for that. Hopefully that answered your question. Let's see what else we have here. Another person's asked, what is the software protection that comes with a Microsoft server? The software, I think you're talking about the software restriction policy that we talked about. that is built into to something called group policy that's on any Windows server that's still in use today. Group policy, you use that to apply specific configurations and policies to users. You can apply it to computers. You can apply policies to groups of users and computers. It's very configurable, very granular. But part of that group policy is the software restriction policy, and you find that under it under the user configuration section. So you would go there. You would set up the policies that you need. And then you apply those policies. You apply them to users, or you could apply them to a group of users or specific computers, that sort of thing. But that's all done under group policy. Someone else asked if they can receive a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. I don't think I have any way of making that available for download, but I do know that after the presentation concludes, you will get an email, and there'll be a replay link in that email. And I think you can actually download it as a video, so you could play it back that way. You could play it back that way as well. Let's see. So here's a good question. I think a couple people have actually asked this. Regarding, I guess, priorities, how would you prioritize these items? If we can't implement them all at once, where would you start? That's totally understandable. You've just received a ton of information, and you can't just snap your fingers and make all this stuff or put all this stuff in place. I would start by making sure that you have endpoint security software on every single workstation, every single server. That's the very first thing that needs to be in place. I would not recommend any computer be on a network without some endpoint security software installed. From there, I would go with the UTM Gateway because that has the additional security services running on top of it. You put that at the edge of your network, it's going to stop a lot of bad stuff from coming in. That combined with endpoint security software, and you've got a pretty good start. Depending on the constraints, if your constraint is budget, then I would move on to the things that you really don't have to purchase. We talked about several things where you just need to configure them and not necessarily buy something new. The patching and updates, you can use Windows updates for that. Make sure your computers are getting the updates and the patches that they need. Restricting administrative rights, that's simply another configuration. It's how you set up your user accounts. You want to make sure your employees are working with a standard user account and not that administrative account. What else? The software restriction policies, they don't require anything to purchase, and the SPF record as well. You can set that up without any additional outlay. And beyond that, I would suggest where your problem's at. Are if your people are spending 20 minutes a day deleting spam and trying to clean up their inboxes and things like that, I would move on to spam filtering, content URL filtering after that. So hopefully that helps. I know it's kind of daunting to look at it all at one time, but hopefully that helps out. Let's see. Okay, here's another one. This person says, "Where's the best place to set up USB protection?" I think that question is regarding how you can restrict your USB ports so that you cannot copy files off the computer onto a USB thumb drive. That would be set up. Normally, you set that up in the endpoint security software. So if you have something like Semantic Endpoint Protection or Bitdefender, most of these software packages have a USB protection option. Sometimes you'll only find that option in the higher level editions of that program. The lower levels may just focus on antivirus and malware. But if you get the suite or the bundled options with that, you'll usually find that USB protection option. Let's see what else we have here. Okay, so here's a question. Should I install Windows updates as soon as they come out? That's a great question. You hear, oh, there's a new threat out there. You need to patch your computer as soon as you can. So it's, but then you also hear about updates causing problems. maybe causing a crash on a computer or something like that. So maybe you don't want to install them as soon as they come out. Here's what I would recommend: making sure you get those security updates on there first, and get those on there as soon as you can. Right now, the way Windows Update works is Microsoft has divided them into quality updates and feature updates. The quality updates are what include the security patches that you need. So if you see a quality update that's available for installation, go ahead and install that as soon as possible. That's what's going to protect you from those from whatever is the flavor of the week, malware, ransomware, virus, etc. And then those feature updates, there's really no harm in holding off on those. That's going to be stuff like new functionality, that sort of thing. We like to see those having been released for maybe a few weeks or maybe a month before we install those. That way we can get a good feel if they're causing any problems, if they're safe to install, or if we need to hold off more. Let's see what else we have here. Here's one. Okay, this person says, how does all this apply if we don't work in a central office, if we have laptops and tablets out in the field? So, great question. I would say most of what we've talked about is still applied. You just kind of need to make it work with your business here. If you have a remote workforce or people that are using laptops and they're in and out of the office constantly, they're not sitting at a desk connected to a server, I would suggest you focus on those cloud solutions that we talked about as opposed to the installed software. So a cloud spam filter, cloud endpoint security software, cloud content and URL filtering, all those cloud all the cloud solutions are going to be able to reach your computers wherever they are, whereas some of this installed software might only be able to connect to your computer when it's in the office and has that connection to the server. So I would definitely suggest you lean towards those cloud solutions. And then also make sure, regarding your UTM Gateway, make sure you get one of those with VPN capabilities. The VPN will let your users connect back to the office, and then you can still use things like group policy and software restriction policies that we talked about. Those will apply to the computers and can transmit over that VPN connection. Same thing with administrative rights. You can still restrict administrative rights using the VPN connection as well. But the principles are the same. They just tailor them to your specific needs and processes. So that would the key there would be to make sure that you have your solutions work in both the remote office and the central office environments. So let's see if we have anything else here. Somebody asked if I could put my email up one more time. Email address is pbanks@banks-tech.com. Like I said, if I don't get to your question, I think we're actually about to run out of time here. If I don't get to your question, feel free to contact me. I'd be happy to answer anything else that you guys have. And yes, it does look like we are out of time. So that's, again, I just want to thank you guys for trusting me with an hour of your day. I hope that you've come away with a better understanding of network security. Hope you have some ideas and maybe some actions you can take to improve the security of your network. So with that, I'm going to toss it back over to Christine. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much for that great presentation, Philip. If you missed parts of today's session or want to review it at any time, you can find the recording in our online archive at verizon.com/webinar. Today's session will be uploaded soon, and I invite you to check out our library of past sessions. You can also find more useful information at our social media sites. Just search for Verizon Business Markets on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And when you need to make decisions about your phone, broadband, cloud-based security, and storage or related communication needs, I invite you to visit us at verizon.com/smallbusiness or call us at 1-800-VERIZON. We hope you will join us for our next webinar on April 25th when USA Today small business columnist Steve Strauss shares with us his tips and tricks for getting customers to find and choose your business. Often called America's most popular small business columnist, Steve is a best-selling author and senior USA Today columnist whose content and media appearances reach millions. Watch for email reminders about the next session or visit verizon.com/webinar to register. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Have a great day, and I hope to see you here again next month.